If you have to build infrastructure that serves humanity, dealing with extreme amounts of diversity, extreme amounts of chaos, anything that can go wrong will go wrong.
If you can do this at a population scale, there's an opportunity to take this playbook, give it a little bit of a design tweak, and make it at a humanity scale. It'll go beyond just 1.4 billion to 8 billion people. We did not build a road for every car. We built one grid for light bulbs, another grid for toasters, another grid for EV chargers. We built one universal grid. Allows innovations to happen at the edges.
Once you cross over the line, you're viewing the world from that abundant lens. That's just a start. Awesome. So Sujith, great to be doing this
Absolutely.
together as co-founders of Networks for Humanity.
Yeah.
Finally, this has taken life.
What a leap. Yeah, Networks for Humanity. We've been thinking about it for a while, and
Yeah.
I'm glad that this is happening. In a way, it's not surprising at the same time. For, very clearly we saw some of these things coming. Just that we didn't have the right vocabulary to begin with. But I think over the last 15 years, what we have done, it was quite evident that this was meant to happen.
Yeah.
We will see how this goes from here, but very exciting.
Feels like that.
Yeah.
What Networks for Humanity. I mean, we couldn't have picked a more grandiose
I know.
name. As Nandan says.
I know. Yeah. So, one is, of course, we kind of play with the word population scale as if, we wake up with that word in the morning and we, go to bed with that thought about population scale. And that's a thought that was probably never with me till about 2009-10 when, of course, the digital ID Aadhaar program started. So we think about population scale quite intuitively now. But I think this seems a little bigger. So to talk about doing it for 8 billion people, for whole of humanity, sounds bigger. Yeah, it's just a multiplication factor of 8 coming from India.
Yeah.
But that 8 is quite a leap. What do you think?
Yeah. No, what's exciting is if you have to build infrastructure that serves humanity or the planet as a whole. And I feel a lot of learnings around how do you design infrastructure that caters to population scale, which means what is population scale? It means you're dealing with extreme amounts of diversity.
Yeah.
You're dealing with extreme amounts of chaos. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Yeah. And so how do you navigate these environments, which will also have multiple stakeholders, public authorities, private sector? So how do you navigate these environments and still get what you want? Yeah. Still get to a state where you can empower people with their digital identity, empower people with access to their bank accounts, empower people with access to money, data, and now many more, right? So I'd be keen to get what's your mental model of what does it mean to you to build population scale infrastructure?
Yeah, when I started off doing this, and I was lucky enough to be part of the Aadhaar program, the India's ID program at that time. But I think in the last 15 years, having seen this pattern, this sort of population scale done a few times and multiple times, one, it sort of gives the confidence. One, I think it does offer a very practical, very implementable playbook to build these massive playgrounds of innovation at population scale. And this is, as much as it sounds radical in terms of scale that we have tried to do, doing 20 billion payments a month and all that, I think there is a very practical way of building an open playbook which has a massive programmable digital infrastructure, and that kind of dramatically collapses cost around movement of value, trust, money, so that everybody can just come, they can just flood in. You can get the entire market to come in. New sort of incentive structures open up, and innovations of all kinds, the whole kind of combinatorial innovations that have shaped up just by making that playbook available and the open playground available. That's one. And through this and this discussion on NFH and the idea that there's something bigger that was kind of like showing up. It's kind of putting its head out and looking at us, screaming at us, saying, maybe there's something even bigger. If you can do this at a population scale, I think there's an opportunity to take this playbook, give it a little bit of a design tweak, as I would call it, and make it at a humanity scale. It'll go beyond just 1.4 billion to 8 billion people. And that's where I think I'm thinking about these designs and and the idea of what we call the universal digital infrastructure. And that's fascinating. And when I think about it, it suddenly becomes so obvious. Now if I look at some of the large physical infrastructure like roads and electricity grid, I mean, we did not build a road for every car. It's not like if I buy a Ferrari, the Ferrari company is going to give me a designer road to drive on. The roads are common. We did not build a road for cars separately and for buses separately. And same with the electricity grid. We did not build one grid for light bulbs, another grid for toasters, another grid for EV chargers. We built one universal grid. And the universal grid is actually catering to the whole of humanity. It's the same blueprint that caters to the whole of humanity, but it allows innovations to happen at the edges. So we're going from this very rigid, purpose-specific, where you think of the solution and build the infrastructure below, whether you're doing things for, so let's say payments, or you're doing this for vaccination, you're doing this for carbon provenance in a supply chain. Maybe all of them can be done on one universal infrastructure if you think really hard about it. So that way of thinking is probably the most exciting thing that seems to have come out of the journey. And I just can't wait to explore that a bit more with Networks with Humanity.
And what are examples? I mean, what excites me about the idea of universal digital infrastructure is it's very similar to, let's say, operating systems in all our pockets, right? That's how smartphones work. It's common infrastructure. Earlier on, app developers had to partner with telecom companies, and you were reliant on their stack. You had very local distribution. And then you look at just the power of that abstraction, where you built this OS and embedded it within smartphones as a hardware form factor and scaled it out to 6 billion people around the world. Is just insane, because now people can develop innovations distributed regionally, globally, at a click of a few buttons. And if we can bring that kind of transformation to capital markets or financial markets more broadly, which I think that's what Finternet touches upon. If you can bring that transformation to energy, commerce, mobility, which is what Beacon touches upon, I mean, they're just so exciting. Like the conviction in, and I feel we can do that. We can pull it off.
The other day, said we were having this conversation around the whole packetization that TCP/IP has done. And it's actually inspired by shipping containers.
Exactly.
It's such a fascinating story. I mean, what is a shipping container? It just needs probably an 8th class maths to figure out what a cuboid design is. But the fact that it's a very silly, miniaturized design, whether you're moving, a truck full of diapers to moving a car, you're essentially using one shipping container. But what that shipping container design did is created a whole lot of second and third order impact. Because before that, you need a lot of money, people, to move different forms and sizes of packages, from barrels to drums to, what have you. But now with that shipping container, you're not just solved for standardization of moving packages, but it changed the whole industry. So your shipbuilding started building around that design. Can I make a container? Ships. My trucks, my freight. So which means if there is one universal way of moving stuff across all forms of logistics, it just created a second order effect. Today, it brought this idea of reliability to shipment. Like, I don't need to have a manufacturing center right close to where the market is. I can just manufacture it anywhere, and the fact that any ship can go and put it in any container manufactured by anybody and just bring it sort of adds to that reliability. Just took away that friction which was sometimes so invisible. The things that we have done, Siddharth, in the last is to kind of go after those hard frictions, right? Which nobody talks about. That the friction of trust, coordination, cost, the real friction of moving value, and everybody is doing that, solving for that in silos. But having this universal, like shipping container, like design of an architecture, which talks about minimalism, generalization, and decentralization, where no one guy is controlling the manufacturing of those containers. If we can bring that, I think it significantly unlocks value. It not just reduces cost, it creates a whole new value that we can't even foresee. This is the moment I call building from the future, not building from the past. I mean, if you just take a look at UPI, UPI was not a faster Visa or a MasterCard. It just got a better design because it came from the future by asking what is going to be abundant in the future. You're going to have smartphones, you're going to have cheap data plans. And back in 2013, when Nandan and Pramod were talking about it, I said, can we build around that future rather than building a better version of a card? And that way of thinking with these kind of principles of design, I just can't wait to see that. And I'm not even talking about the rest of the things that are happening around this time. And I'm sure you're going to talk about it, like tokenization and others. It's a great time to be bringing this design mindset into doing this at such an audacious scale.
Yeah. And I feel really when you look at progress and unlocking more progress for humanity, it comes down to two core primitives.
Yeah.
One is means of coordination,
Yeah.
and second is actual hard innovation.
Yeah.
And both of these are very critical,
Yeah.
right? Means of coordination could be legal structures, or now driven through crypto, you have new kinds of ways of establishing trust.
Yeah.
Open networks are another new way of coordinating. And then the second is actually underlying innovations that are taking place, right? Whether it's in AI and biotech and a whole range of space and so on. But these two really go hand in hand. And a lot of what we've been doing has been in the area of actually in this very boring space,
Yeah.
creating new ways for people to establish trust and coordinate, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we could touch on what does that look like from a backend standpoint? How do you see it unlocking new forms of coordination in a world where everyone is connected, everything is connected,
Yeah.
everyone and everything has some sort of device,
Yeah.
form factors may evolve. What becomes abundant and how could we establish trust, and what are new ways I could, we've been talking about bringing programmability to copper wires, right? How do you see that playing out?
No, absolutely. I mean, those are some of those, happy accidents or serendipitous leaps that I see myself taking, because there was, just like I said, there's nothing in the design of internet that could have foretold the occurrence of a chat GPT 50 years later, but you needed internet to get there. I'm seeing a similar moment of serendipity with backend. When we started backend about 6 years ago, we were thinking about, okay, let's talk about moving value in the form of goods and services, and ask this question: what does it take for a consumer and provider, the guy who needs it and the guy who wants it or that has it, to talk to each other? And does it really need somebody in between? Does it really need somebody in between to offer trust and reliability and fulfillment? Can we do that? In this era, in this decade, if there's a possibility of not having an intermediary or an institution to offer that trust and capacity to reduce that cost of coordination with cryptographic trust, with e-signatures and zero-knowledge proofs, it is possible to use a low-cost, high-velocity cryptographic commitments to get this consumer-provider interactions happen on the way. You can do a contracting on the fly. You don't need somebody in the center to be giving that assurance from the both sides. Now, that way of thinking, little did I think that it'll open up in the space of moving electricity. It's fascinating how I see this, as I call the impact aperture, opening up with the energy transition. I think we never had this kind of moment that we're going through right now in this decade, in the last 120 years, ever since AC/DC war, where you are suddenly seeing the grid is becoming increasingly decentralized, hyper-localized. Instead of few hundred generators miles away from the city, thousands of miles away from the city, you have millions of micro generators through solar rooftops, and then you have battery to store that extra energy to use it in the night, suddenly becoming these virtual energy generators that are available in your neighborhood. And you're not just buying energy as a consumer, you're actually selling it back as a prosumer. And I think this bidirectionality, decentralization, completely changes how we think about accelerating formal, secure, affordable energy and clean energy for the whole of humanity. We still have about close to 1 billion people who don't have access to formal electricity. And that happening on one side, and of course the whole climate conversations talking about electrifying the industries like transport and manufacturing and all of that, creating a whole new kind of demand and load growth to the grid. The question is, what if even the energy resources and assets, be it generators, batteries, your electric vehicles connecting to the grid, have a simple thing like how internet, every device has an IP address. You connect your phone to internet, you get an IP address for that moment while you're on the internet. Can we have addressability of all these assets? Once you put an addressability, can you discover, observe, communicate, and talk, and even tokenize? Can I put my home battery when I'm not at home, which is lying idle, or tokenize 30% of that battery and make it available virtually on the network for somebody else to store energy and take it out, even if I don't have an energy store? So can I put it out? What does it mean? for unemployed youth in low-income countries. That could be an income that they can make from energy. For a driver, that's extra money for a car lying idle when he's getting no rides as a taxi driver. So it creates a whole lot of possibilities. We are looking at ways in which I myself, if I have some extra solar energy which I don't want to use, I can actually, instead of selling it back to the utility, and sometimes it's tough on the utilities because utilities don't want to buy it at that time because that's not the peak demand, but I can sell it to someone else. So we're talking about peer-to-peer exchanges of energy. These are things I would have never thought about. But there's always this, opening up of the aperture when things like this happen, and then if you're just be there, be lucky to see it and get started, and just be prepared with an idea like Beacon, you suddenly see a whole new playground opening up, and that's very exciting about energy. Similar conversations with circularity, whether it's on used goods or water. A lot of work in that space around climate and sustainability, and then of course the work we're doing with commerce, and then again the whole coming of agents, and when agents start transacting, I think that's going to open a whole new field on top of it with an idea like Beacon. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, I feel particularly as we move in, like the intersection points are fascinating. So the way we've set up Networks for Humanity is we decided to set it up as a network of labs, right? And across the US, Switzerland, Singapore, India, and more jurisdictions. And really work on the hardest problems and work on them in a way where we can create maximum leverage by working with public authorities, private sector to bring that to life. And the way we've structured it is, at this point, we have like three key missions. One is creating new kinds of trust infrastructure for the internet. Second is Beacon. Third is Finternet. And what's also interesting is the relationships between each, right? As you touched upon, when Beacon's working on things around energy, you can actually use tokenization to unlock financing back to those same participants within the network. Credit or tax credits as well, or loans and other types of even payments or micropayments that are done. Similarly, in the case of commerce, once you've contracted between a set of peers, you then can use underlying Finternet infrastructure for unlocking escrow payments, programmable payments, or other kinds of, again, workflows that allow you to enhance the trust between these two peers. So what I'm starting to see is there are a couple of points that have become embedded within what we're doing at NFH, right? One is this idea around really empowering individuals and facilitating peer-to-peer transactions at scale. And obviously, when you start to facilitate peer-to-peer transactions at scale, you will have other types of institutions or intermediaries that get involved. But really, the idea is to unlock a lot of peer-to-peer access, whether it's in areas of financial transactions, energy transactions, commerce, really allowing the people on the edges to transact with each other. The second is unlocking it in a way where rather than each of them have to build infrastructure from scratch, you have really foundational operating system-like components, or as you described, universal digital infrastructure, UDI, that supports them, allows them to get started, go live much faster. And also our ability to take on riskier projects than, let's say, a typical startup. So how do you see sort of the NFH environment playing into the Beacon mission and other ideas that you have in your head?
I think one scenario, just to play out how NFH makes it so much more powerful for us, is that just think about Beacon as a mission in isolation. It probably continues to do what it does. It talks about, okay, how do we move value, goods and services between them, and then constantly worry about how are we solving for the other things that come with it. For example, like you said, how do I bring people's identity and assets onto this plane for them to kind of move that value in some sense. And that's where it becomes so easy for us to just bring this on top of Finternet mission and say that, okay, I can leverage Finternet as any backend network mission anywhere can leverage the underlying Finternet infrastructure to kind of bolster it and take care of the things that you spoke about. And that's where I think this ability to combine these two missions to actually unlock value for the users, the small businesses, the farmers, and the taxi drivers to do much more becomes so much more powerful. It's like literally, it's like taking a steroid shot for backend, which Finternet could offer, and it kind of complements the idea. And then you talk about the trust infrastructure work we're doing with decentralized directories. It just makes it so natural for backend to create a global discovery infrastructure if everybody use this public, decentralized directory as a way to publish anything that's ready for public to see and watch and use,
Yeah.
and just bring that and just reduces so much of friction. So I don't see a reason why not doing it this way is going to get me doing backend at a mission at the scale and speed
Yeah.
that we want to do. And that's where it is. And what I am fascinated about, the many things that you are trying to unlock in the broader vision of Internet. There's so much more that you're unpacking. I just want to know if there are any few nuggets that you want to reveal and talk about. That will be fascinating.
Yeah.
Because that's the side that I'm more excited about. The whole advent of your vision and the work you're doing. Would love to hear more of that.
Yeah. So from a Finternet perspective, I think there are a couple of tracks that we're really anchoring. One is because a lot of what impacts finance closely involves regulations and supervision. One track is really looking at how do we help shape the future of regulation, the future of supervision. What are the underlying technologies and new kinds of legal and liability frameworks that can be created? And so that's where we're then partnering, like, for example, what we are working with Cambridge on, which is the Cambridge Initiative for Digital Innovation and Regulations, is really in that direction. So to work with regulators in a cross-sectoral manner, multi-jurisdictional manner, tech-forward manner on what this future looks like. Because that's key. If you really want to scale out population adoption of this infrastructure, that becomes extremely important. So that's one line of work.
Yeah.
The second line of work, I would say still within the legal and policy bucket, is what I'd call legal engineering, which is a more here and now problem of how do you figure out, okay, if you want to tokenize different types of assets, how do you do that? What are the governance arrangements? How do we operationally execute that, right? While, of course, what is the reforms required from a legal regulatory perspective take a bit longer. Then the other track that we're really focused on is building out the core technical infrastructure. So how do I tokenize different assets? How do I have interoperability across the different tokenized assets? How could anyone transact, individuals and businesses? How do they attach their digital identities and other proofs to these transactions? How does that work at scale? So there are a lot of interesting questions. How do agents start to plug into this? And then the third track is actually working with early adopters, a whole new range. And that's the most exciting. I think if you really wear the hat of an abundance mindset of what these technologies unlock, because I feel like if you come at it from very much the traditional system and then you're trying to apply your rational model and look at it, you don't see the exponential impact these technologies can have, because you're often saying, okay, this is the mental model of the world I know, and how do I bridge to this new world? So a lot of the work I have to do at Finternet is really imagining I'm born again. And then saying, okay, what if I was born today? How would I just adopt this technology? Because then I would just be focused on what does this mean for me? What can I build? Versus otherwise getting too caught up in my head of, oh, this is what I know. And so there on the use case side, really imagining how do people pay across borders for a fraction of a cent in real time, globally, using programmable forms of money in ways that not just individuals but agents could authorize. The kinds of applications that unlocks, because there'll be whole new industries. I mean, your personal passion on the screenwriting side, script writing side, the content creators, the ability for them to own their content, monetize their content rather than they're at the mercy of a whole bunch of studios and other intermediaries. You can completely transform that economy. You think about new kinds of distribution that will open up, new kinds of content was one side, but the other angle we've been thinking about is how do you democratize ownership for everyone, right? Where everyone feels they have a stake in their local or regional or the global economy. Today, you can't do that because the transaction costs for doing any form of investment is so high. You look at the new models that are coming up, for example, recently on prediction markets. It's fascinating, right? Where you're having people say, okay, I want to create a financial market and create a way much that facilitates greater truth seeking behavior.
Yeah.
You didn't have that infrastructure before. So I just feel that the world we're heading towards, the other thing that excites us is we've been working with many countries across the world and they don't have domestic infrastructure. And the only mental model so far, which you touched upon, was building infrastructure from scratch, right?
Yeah.
And that's really expensive. In my view, at least 100, 120 countries can leapfrog to the most advanced capital markets, payment systems, asset systems more broadly. That wasn't possible before because you now got universal ledgers, you've now got tokenization, you've got underlying internet plumbing now with Starlink coming in, everyone is connected as well, right? Yeah. So their ability to leapfrog to actually facilitate these transactions, whereas earlier on they would have had to invest, build everything from scratch, operate it, attract developers. It's just really painful, and so they were held back. Just changes the game.
Yeah. You know, it's so audacious, lucid. You have a vision of internet. It's audacious at so many levels, One, the sheer expansiveness of how it can change things in many sectors and across many asset classes. And also at the same time, it's comprehensive in terms of how you're going about it. You're not just talking to a bunch of innovators in one sector on one side. You're talking about comprehensive as a whole framework, as a system, getting regulators, innovators, the whole legal engineering part of it, making them all kind of graduate into this vision in some kind of a harmony, although they're kind of asynchronous in many ways, is fascinating. And the lucid, practical way that you're doing it with this calibrated approach, as we talk about, it also feels like you literally have seen this happen, at least in your dreams, or as well like you've walked into that future and you're coming back and telling us, okay, we've already done this, I'm just going to show you how.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. So what's been the response? Who are you talking to? Who are the people who are kind of chasing you to get this thing done?
Yeah, so I mean, it does feel like that, which I feel like a lot of it just goes back to really imagining what is the future you want to build for yourself and for people that you care about, and then you just work backwards from there.
Yeah.
I think that's the heart of any innovation, and then you figure out everything else that's required to make it happen, right? Everything else is downstream of that conviction, essentially. A lot of the people we've been talking to, it's a broad mix. So I think one is financial institutions, asset managers, governments, crypto companies, both traditional and new age fintechs. So I essentially speak to everyone that has something of a vague interest in what we're doing. And what we're now putting together is actually clear cohorts based on where we're seeing there is early forms of maturity. Because with any new technology, you're trying to find also the intersection between who are your early customers and what is the current infrastructure intersecting with their needs. While, of course, we can do all this great magic, where do you find sort of the seed intersection, right? What gaming was to NVIDIA or what Roadster was to Tesla. And so we are now at the phase of trying to figure out, okay, what does that intersection look like that allows us to take the next step and take the next step and take the next step. And there we're finding a lot of it seems to be in the direction of new age companies that are thinking very natively about what the underlying primitives like public blockchains unlock. And then, yes, certain constructs from the existing world make sense. Like, for example, yes, I will always need a place to have a safe store of my money or wealth. I will always need the ability to transact. I will always need the ability to get access to credit. But the means with which it would get delivered is going to be very different. The formats in which it's going to get delivered is very different. I will always want to have upside in something, equity, for example. But the ways people will interact with that, like one of the things we see is the culture of investment. I mean, with what's happening on the crypto side of things, where right now a lot of it is speculative activity, but essentially people playing around.
Yeah.
And it was insane. So a few days back, actually, I was playing around and I was trying to figure out a few things on the trading side and trying to figure out, okay, what is really liquidity, margins, limits. Yeah, might be extremely basic stuff. Feel like a noob, but I was just trying to get a feel of really what it is.
Yeah.
Like you hear about it, we think we know it. So I was trying to play around, and so I just had my trading terminal and a crypto trading terminal on one of the exchanges, and ChatGPT open. And I would just take like screenshots and paste in ChatGPT and be like, explain it to me. And then in real time, I could take that and put in money, like I would put in $1 and execute that trade.
Yeah.
And then I'd execute a trade at 40x leverage, okay, which is insane. But and then I could see in real time the price moving and it falls or goes up. And based on what I've set, do I make, do I lose? But basically in that span of 30 minutes, I learned far more than any textbook, any podcast, anything could offer me. And so I think that level of democratization and that convergence between, because there's no way I could do it in the traditional financial system. It was impossible.
Yeah.
I could just study the theory or spend week. It was impossible to get access to these markets and the tools and the subscriptions. Just no way. But now you take the convergence of that and the convergence of AI and the massive democratization it unlocks. I mean, I don't know how fully the future will shape out, but it's just stuff like that that's super, super exciting that we get to experiment with within a lab construct.
No, absolutely. I think one of the things that I'm picking from what you just said, one is the convergence. I think I think I can say that for you as well, that we would love to see these convergence happening, right? That's a moment that's an inflection point of suddenly things changing. I mean, tokenization, cryptographic technologies and currencies and all of that coming, and then you have AI coming from one side, and the general decentralization shift that we are seeing through in the economy, all of that converging. And of course, you have some big shifts with things like sustainability and other big shifts where people are actually talking about conscious consumerism and all of that. When these things come, you're actually offering a completely new. You're asking different questions, and that's serendipity. At least for me, the reason why we have this little forest in our office here in India is to kind of remind us that half of that what we are trying to do that was never thought about.
Yeah.
We were just available to be sort of lucky and to create that happy accidents. I think the half of the job is to sort of set up that playground, set up that infrastructure, and make things happen. So as much as seems like a very, very clear vision that we have, most of the times we're saying just think it's a leap of faith and see what comes out, and something it's so fascinating that you go after it, like we're doing with energy right now. So that's very exciting. And I think between all the missions of NFH and make NFH come together, I think the next 2 years are going to be pretty exciting.
Super
yes, there are going to be some bruises. We're going to have some falls and all of that. but I think it's definitely something that. Would you have done this if you had known this 5 years ago? Would you be doing this again and again if you were given this? Like I probably would. When I started this foundation with Beck, and I said I'd probably pay Nandan to do this more and more. So I just can't wait to see the new unlocks that are happening, although we can't define them.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. When I was doing this ID program in India, I didn't really know exactly what's going to happen, but I was pretty sure that it's not going to be the end. This way of thinking of Earth scale is not going to be end. It's just going to come in a different form and avatar. And I've seen that pattern a few times. I just can't wait to see what that is.
Yeah.
Is that something that you share as a sentiment and excitement?
100%. I feel like, once you cross over the line of viewing the world from that abundant lens, once you have conviction that you can shape the world, and then you can do that with a great set of people, you promote Nandan and the rest of the team. Once you have conviction that there's a method to this sort of madness of figuring out what you want to build and bringing that future forward, or bringing that future present in some sense. then it's just you take it by the day, and how do you show up? What does it mean to actually give your best? How much more can you like pull out of yourself, right? And I feel that part, like to me, I feel that's just a start. So what's exciting me is that through missions like the Finternet and what we're building, there's just like I feel we're just like scratching the surface. So there's just so much more. And so how can we do that? How can we do that much faster? I'm excited for what the next few years reflect.
Absolutely. It's a lot more pots of coffee, so some crazy, crazy grind. I know I get some dirty looks from my team when I talk about it's exciting. I said, oh shit, what are we chasing this time? So, yeah, I don't know if this is going to be part of the recording. Sorry, I'll take back that word. But it's a very exciting time. Exciting, and the pain is real. The excitement is real, and can't wait to have both in this journey. Yeah?
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks.
Great stuff.
Sujith.
Fascinating conversation. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.